All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Business Strategies Roundtable. Today, I have Robert Isaacs from Nine Minds on for a conversation about utilizing open source technology as an entrepreneur. Robert, thank you for being here. Before we went live, Robert said probably one of the most interesting things about AI that I've heard in a long time, which says a lot because I try to listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think the topic is particularly interesting. He was talking about some of his perspectives on worst case scenarios, and I, in hearing his depth of knowledge, said that I wished I'd started sooner with a computer science education than what I did. And Robert, you then said, and this is what I think is particularly interesting, it turns out that actually communicating with it in English turns out to be most effective currently. And that kind of made me double back a little bit, and I started to ask questions, and then I said, let's hold on to it. So, hi, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being here, and I would love if you'd share a little bit on your thought process there.
Yeah, hey Zach, thanks for having me. So it's really interesting to think about. I kind of started from the same place that you were kind of describing, where I thought, oh, AI is going to be this thing where I need to go and I need to kind of discover how to do, AI modeling and learn algorithms and try to learn how to train large language models and use there's like a 1,000 page deep learning book that used to be the Bible. But as time goes on, one particular type of AI model has kind of taken over, and that's the transformer. And essentially that just kind of takes English and natural language and responds to you and does things in response to that. So, I mean, these days, as I'm writing code, I'm not writing code anymore. I'm kind of describing the code to the language models, and they're outputting the code. I mean, it knows more about computer science than I ever will, even though I have a computer science background. But really, it's kind of like a new programming language. It's like you tell it what you want to do with enough specificity, but in a human language, and you just let it go to town.
I tried to write code with ChatGPT once, probably 8 months ago. And I will tell you, it was not as easy as I wanted it to be. Now, two things are at play there. The first is I'm not much of a coder. And the second is I was earlier on in my use of AI and understanding of it. What do you think of that?
Well, 8 months is like 8 years, at this point. All the, really all the people in the know these days are using this thing called Claude.
So What's it called? Because I'm not in the know.
It's called Claude by Anthropic.
Claude.
Claude 3.5. Yeah, it's amazing.
It
It's
sounds like a
amazing.
word my mom used to use to describe folks that don't shower regularly.
Yeah, I think it's like he's supposed to be like a really boring kind of, you know,
Yeah, okay,
kind
same
of help.
word.
No one to be scared of. No one's scared of Claude.
Yeah, nobody's scared. Claude.
Yeah.
Claude, not a clod.
Oh yeah, like Claude,
Let
Claude.
me let me go to my notes and fix that.
Well,
Okay. So tell me about Claude, which
yeah,
is
it's an
different.
amazing software engineer. I think that there are these tools out there where you basically describe what you want as like a program, and 75% of the time it just gets it right. So you go over there and you say, I want to, you can start with something easy. I want an asteroids game, or I want Pac-Man, or I want Tetris, and it just comes out with it. Um, and so the work that I'm doing these days, I'm doing things the old-fashioned way where I'm typing and I'm, there's a bug here, and then I think, wait a second, and then I just go to my little side menu and I say, can you just fix this? And it just does. And so what I do these days is I try to think about things a little differently, where I think, am I working on a big enough portion of this task, right? Because you can kind of like small step things and work, but you can also just tell it, this is what I want to do at a high level, and that's that kind of like English, as the programming language kind of idea. This is what I want from a high level. Give it a shot. And I'm finding that more times than not, it actually comes out better than what I would have come up with anyway. And it's just minutes.
And
Minutes.
this is called Claude.
Yeah.
And is it a free tool, or I imagine a lot of these days have a free. They
There's a free
they like
tier.
to give you, yeah, they like to get you on there.
Yeah, they get you hooked.
Yep.
But there's a lot of them these days. I mean, there are tools for, ChatGPT is kind of like the Swiss Army knife.
Hmm.
Claude's kind of the great programmer these days. And then, companies like mine, we try to, really kind of niche down and find a place where we can make a mark.
Cool. Well, thank you for that introduction to A, the podcast, and B, to your wealth and depth of knowledge. I'm excited for the rest of the conversation. Let's move a little bit into an interview so that folks can learn about your entrepreneurial journey and a little bit more about you. I like to take in the first half of the podcast an opportunity to dig into folks' background, because I find that the entrepreneurial journey um, is not, I almost want to say it's not even a defined path. And it's particularly shouldn't be considered to be a defined path for individuals, because everybody has different strengths and weaknesses and backgrounds and experiences. And if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to figure out how to meld all of that authenticity into something that's going to be effective, because to be an entrepreneur means you kind of have to be always going a little bit. You have to really actually enjoy what you do and care about it, which means you have to be willing to be yourself and in it. So everybody's entrepreneurial journey is different, and part of what I like to do with this is show folks it doesn't matter where you are or what you know. If you are willing to figure it out, you can figure it out. And I think showing lots of different pathways and stories is a great way to enlighten that perspective. So Robert, where did it start for you? Tell me a little bit about your career, and maybe even if you could tell your education background, or if you feel comfortable sharing, what types of stuff did you like as a kid? What was your like? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I think I'm maybe the only person that I've ever met who knew from birth what I wanted to do.
That's
Yeah,
so
at
cool.
least it seems to be. I mean, I remember that, I don't know, I must have been second, third grade, and I was thinking, I need to learn how to read better because I can't like figure out these technical manuals. Like I wanted to know, what
Oh my
is this
goodness.
stuff? Like I remember speaking to someone, I must have been like a babysitter or something, and he had seen a computer, which was amazing to me. because I wanted to know what they could do, and he was describing all these things. So my earliest memories, I remember the stuff. It must have been the movie War Games. That's the only thing I can think of that may have kind of sparked this interest in me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just like, oh, I can't believe this person has seen a computer, which it probably was like 1985 or so, which there were pretty nice computers out there. I'm not sure what I was doing, but uh, yeah, I mean, so I wanted everything was about that. I remember, the math book. I'm supposed to be doing math, and there's these little basic programs in there, so I'm trying to do that instead. Um, so really, that's what it's always been about for me. And kind of, sometimes I think
What was
about,
your first big win with
oh,
programming?
it was like you go to the computer, and I was just thinking, I was like, wait a second, I can print something, and then I can do like go to, and it should print it over and over and over again. So I kind of like came up with that, like a basic loop where it would print something
Mm,
forever. And
yeah.
I remember running to my room and trying it. And when it worked, it was like the most amazing experience ever. So I mean, that's like the
How old
perfect,
were you?
that was third grade. So eight
Wow.
or nine, something like that.
Yeah.
Kids these days get started earlier,
Yeah,
it's so
they're born
easy.
with the phone these days or something.
I
They're
had a
all they're all influencers now.
Yeah, they always want to be YouTubers. I have my nephew, Nash. He's an amazing little kid, and he's so smart. And in a lot of ways, he's a much smarter version than I ever was. But I remember I was asking him, I said, "So are you still programming?" Like trying to make small talk. He's like, "Yes, why would I give up on my dream?" I was like, that was so profound to me that I just kind of like, I've been thinking about that forever.
I
So
love it.
yeah, so a lot of this has been about creativity for me. The entrepreneurial journey in some ways is about how can I do something that's economically sustainable and allow me to do what I love, to be creative, to work with great people. And a lot of it is just like, okay, well, we have to take what we have and the skills that we have, and we have to find a way to make that work. So always wanted to start a business, always wanted to do a career in software. And I
Did you do
started
a
not,
did you do a formalized education with your
yeah.
so when you were in high school and you knew like I want to start a business, I want to did you ever think about not doing a formalized education or did you know talk a little bit about that decision making process?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, always did pretty well in school. Not great. B's, A's and B's, not straight A's or anything like that. But I didn't really come from a family that emphasized education too much.
Mm,
So I don't recall really. Um, it wasn't a big consideration for me. But when the time came, I kind of wanted to learn more about the things that I was interested in. So I just kind of the next step was to go to the University of South Florida here and go into computer science. So I did
it
that.
looks warm there still.
Was that
I lived in Fort Lauderdale for a little bit, and it
okay?
looks very nice where you are.
It's nice in Fort Lauderdale too. I was down there not too long ago for a conference.
Cool.
Kind of expensive though. But I guess that's just the way it goes. But yeah, so then I just kind of like went on and did that as well. And I think for a year I was going to do electrical engineering because I thought I've been doing computers my whole life. I want to see if I can actually do something else.
Yeah.
But kind of reality caught up with me, and I was like, I kind of should do what I feel like I was born to do.
Why would you
So
give up on your dream?
see, that's what I mean. It's going to stick with you.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. It's amazing for that's the authenticity of a young person to say
Yeah.
something profound and not even really realize how profound it is. It's just like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, well,
It was
good for
stunning in a way, both in like, "That was a dumb question," him saying to me, and also just, my daughter did that once too. She's like, this was prior to what I do now. She's like, "Don't you wanna work on something that makes people smile?" And I was like, "Oof." That was another one of those.
you. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
A lot of people in this world right now need to hear somebody say that to them.
yeah.
There's a lot of I won't allow myself to dive down that, but that is profound as well. So you thought slightly for a moment about electrical engineering, or did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Electrical engineering,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh, no, 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 let me stay on track. So you finished your degree, and did you do what was computer science like? Um, so I know a little bit about what a computer science degree is like now because I'm halfway through one. But what was it like in when you were in college?
It was amazingly similar. There, there wasn't YouTube, unfortunately. Um,
You had to
Definitely
read the
wasn't.
book, you mean? Oh,
I
jeez.
had to, yeah. And I remember reading the books. You're like, oh, I can't figure out this one problem, and that was like an insurmountable problem. Then, there's nothing you can do at that point. The book doesn't tell you how to do it. You just don't know how to do it. So, in that sense, it was a lot different. But the curriculum was amazingly similar. They were learning Java back then. They're learning Java now.
Mm,
Algorithms, they're the same things, hash tables and linked lists and all that. Really, the fundamentals haven't changed very much. Um, and in a lot of ways, people are still using the same tools as they used back then. I was thinking that, the biggest change in productivity happened. There's only been two big changes in productivity. um, One of them was like the autocomplete, when you're programming and it kind of just tells you what comes next. And then there was the AI stuff. But besides that, it's kind of amazing how applicable, like a 1996 to 2000 computer science education is to today.
I think that makes sense now that you've said it out loud, especially when I think about language in general. Um, we've been we've been using language for a really long time and
Mhm.
writing, and it would make sense that as we move into creating a computerized language, which is what early stage computing was or is. I don't know. Would you was or is?
Well, I mean, things are changing so quickly now. It felt like for a long time things were kind of stagnating or whatever. And a lot of that is just, the weight of what's come um, before you. The billions of lines of Java and the COBOL programmers that are still out there working on those legacy systems. That kind of slows down the rate of progress a little bit, or slows down the rate of change. Sometimes we just change for change's sake.
Hmm,
So that kind of inertia kind of works against some crazy new idea that comes along.
that's fair. That's fair. So, what was the first job out of college,
First job out of
or what
college.
was the first job ever?
Oh my
Maybe is
God. My
the
first
question.
job ever was Stacy's Buffet.
Okay, heck yeah! Shout out to the food service background.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember the first time I could go to a job that I didn't have to like worry about cleaning up at the end of the day, although I probably should have. That was wonderful to me.
That's cool.
But then after that, I went to a small web design company called Web Tech Advertising, and this was back in '95.
Okay.
So the web was like unheard of. I couldn't even get an internet account on my home. I had to go to work to use the web. Um, and yeah, they were like, there's 40,000 people online, which was mind blowing at the time. We
Yeah.
couldn't believe, you know. And then they're like, okay, there's this thing called HTML tables. I remember they got the whiteboard out. They're like, this is how tables work. So that
Wow.
was the first like computer programming job.
What did the early stage websites look like? What were some of the important clients?
You ever see GeoCities?
Mm-mm.
Oh, GeoCities is like this old community where people had the old websites with like the under construction animated GIF and everything.
Yeah.
And that's really what it was like. People were doing things that were creative but horrific, from a design perspective. But it was
Yeah.
very cool. First customers, there's like a radio station around here called 970 WFLA. It's like the talk station. They were one of our customers, so they needed one of these newfangled websites. That was the big one that I remember. I remember Yahoo was a thing.
Yeah.
You had to go to Yahoo for everything.
I
There was no
remember that.
searching.
I remember that. I was born in '94, and I remember when AOL Instant Messenger was a thing, and I remember it felt like Google was the internet when because I was a young man, and it was just like, well, this is where you get to everything. And then Yahoo was also a large piece of that. Um, what a it's come a long way, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember playing chess on Yahoo and thinking it was just like the best way you could ever spend time. You know, it's like, wow, these games.
I know. I Well, you brought up Google, and man, that was a sea change. Prior to that, I remember you had to like put your website into a little box where you would suggest that they index your website, and it would be months, 2 or 3 months, and then your website would show up at some point in time because you'd know because you suddenly started getting orders on your website. That's how you knew that your website
Oh,
had been indexed. So when Google came along and it was like, you hit enter and you see the results, or the your website, you make changes on it and they're there in a couple weeks. That was amazing.
it's so funny you say that because I don't have a web design background, but I did do some of my own web design, which required some hard fought learning and getting used to some things I wasn't super comfortable with. And like when I finished everything and like got it all set up, I had a couple of hiccups, as you do with those types of
Always.
things, especially your first time. And I'm sitting there, asking Google and asking ChatGPT like, how long should I expect things to take? It's so funny to hear the evolution of that. The thing's telling me like, buddy, it should be ready now. You did
Yeah.
something wrong, and you're like, oh, back in the day, you just had to hope.
It was like, okay, I guess I'll sit back for a couple months.
Wild. Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So you worked at one of the first ever web design companies, which I like saying it that way. And then where did you go from there? You probably enjoyed that as a job.
That was pretty cool. Um, they had some financial difficulties. That company was way too early, way too early.
Uh,
And so then I went to go work for a television station, which was really cool because I got to bring people into the TV station, and I had, all this amazing equipment. My friends were working at McDonald's, and I was like the technical operations person at a TV station. And then
yeah.
after that, on to another web company called Doghouse Technologies.
Okay.
So they were also, that was 96. So, no, yeah, that was 96. So 96 through 2000, I worked with Doghouse.
Okay.
And we were just doing web design, web development. Remember well, maybe you don't, but there's like this thing called Cold Fusion that a bunch of people used to use back in the day.
Not hip.
Um,
I'm not hip.
like Hot Dog Pro and all this crazy stuff that's still around to this very day. Um, and that's kind of where I cut my chops, or however they say it,
Yeah.
on web development and programming databases for the web, and we were kind of felt like we were on the bleeding edge. I guess we were in a lot
You
of ways.
were. You were. Well, when there's only 40,000 people, and I say only, and I recognize in the moment it was holy shit, there's 40,000, but I mean,
I'm
you're
coming out of
one
being,
of 40,000. You know what I mean? You were a very early stage. I mean, I remember there are people that are proud of being one of the first cats on Facebook. It's like there are people who are proud to have the first damn comment on a big post, So, I mean, you quite literally, being within that first, I mean, it's like point
yeah.
0.0001% or however many. So, I mean, it is absolutely the bleeding edge. What led you into entrepreneurship? Because having your background, um, and I'm sure this probably helped, right? I'm sure you were able to capitalize on your background and your differentiated knowledge through your career. But what led you into entrepreneurship, where you certainly could have stayed in the comfort of corporate jobs or big jobs where they're desperate for the things that you know, in a differentiated way.
Yeah, so that's kind of the second thing that I always kind of knew, is that I just wanted to do something kind of independently, to build a vision and have a little bit more control over it. Even back in those early days at Doghouse, I had a website that sold magazine subscriptions. Didn't care about magazine subscriptions, but it was just it was my way to learn how to do e-commerce online. So I was like, okay, how do I do? I had like a modem that would dial out and manually do the credit card transactions and everything. There were no
Mm,
authorized.net or anything like that in the day. So it was kind of a fun challenge, and also, like a creative outlet. In a lot of ways, programming software is really similar to creating a company. You've got you've got the algorithm, which is how the business runs. You've got the different modules. They all have to work together, communicate effectively. You need a good strategy for communicating with the outside world. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of the same creative place. So I think that there are a lot of entrepreneurial developers. I would say
yeah.
it's actually pretty common. And if you look at a lot of the big tech
Oh, that's
companies,
true.
they're a lot of them are from a technical background. So I
I
think it's kind of exercises the same parts of the brain.
I absolutely agree, that many entrepreneurial or entrepreneurs, especially successful ones, um, have technical backgrounds, and I also agree that it's a great creative output. And I think creative in my, and I'm going to say something that's maybe a little, little out there for some folks, but I believe that creative expression is whenever you can be your most comfortable and authentic self. And for some people, it's on a basketball court. For some people, it's driving a car. For some people, it's doing coding. For some people, it's playing violin. But whenever you can be super in the moment and like at one with the universe, to where you can let natural, like, your authentic ability or whatever come through, um, and it makes a lot of sense to me hearing you say that, but not being very technical and having a coding background, that somebody who would be technical but also highly creative slash in tune with the universe would receive that experience through their creative practice of coding or working. And from what I know about, the way that your brain is stimulated with eye movement and in sports and in creative actions, I mean, if you're sitting there coding, going back and forth and being in that consistent state, um, that makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting to hear you say it that way. Um,
So one
wow.
of the interesting things that
That's amazing.
I've kind of discovered during this entrepreneurial journey of mine is that there's many paths to success. A lot of entrepreneurs will want to look at themselves and they'll say, I can't do this because I'm not extroverted, or I'm not a great salesperson, or there's these things that they see in themselves that they feel are going to keep them from having success. And you may not have someone else's success, right? So you're not going to be Tony Robbins, probably. Maybe you could if you really tried hard at it, but your skill set's somewhere else, and there's absolutely value there. And every single person has their own pathway that could be successful. That's the way I always looked at entrepreneurship, and that's been
Well,
my
and life.
yeah, for sure.
And life. I think you're absolutely right, and your perspective of programming as a microcosm of building a business, it makes a lot of sense, and it's the first time that I've ever heard it from the perspective of, well, it's the first time I've ever heard it. Period. I like the perspective of handling each, you know, part of the business. Well, we got to figure out billing. Well, we're going to need a way to do this. We're going to need a way to do this, and we're going to have to then teach the program or write the program to do the thing. I mean, it's absolutely true.
And
It's
then it
all
should
systems and processes.
exactly. It should be something that kind of
People
runs
or tech.
itself. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, what was your first entrepreneurial endeavor? And then we'll kind of lead into how entrepreneurs can use open source tech.
Yeah, so the first one was that magazine store thing. And that
Okay.
was kind of like the holy crap, someone's actually paying me kind of moment, which is it's kind of like the holy crap, I just got the program looping feeling. It's the same thing, it's really the
Yeah.
same feeling.
Yeah.
And then every time I've done a business and you get that first customer, it's just such validation of your idea and your creativity and your time. And most of these things, unfortunately, don't pan out, and the statistics aren't great, although probably better than people imagine.
Yeah.
Like I heard
A
the
lot of
five.
the re-
Go ahead.
don't oh, well, a lot of the reason people give up is the point that you said before. Not necessarily that there isn't a pathway for them to success in entrepreneurship, but they take too much of the needing to do it away or thinking that they can't because, and then that's where much of the failure I think happens is in the giving up as opposed to the figuring it out.
Yeah.
You're about to say something about five, and then I interrupted
Oh,
you.
I don't know, but
Shoot.
I'll just keep going. So the next thing after that, I actually went and I did get kind of pulled in to a long-term job
Yeah.
and career because it was kind of nice. I remember getting my first raise at a real company and thinking, "Oh my God, I'd never considered the fact that next year I'm going to be making a little bit more than last year." So that was nice, and it kind of lulled me into a career. I found a place where I could be really creative, and I was
Mm,
in charge of a lot of things. I could have a gigantic impact on the company. Um, kind of one of those people that can, they can just do. They're there for so long. They have all the knowledge, and they're kind of, like making their own path in a way,
yeah.
to some extent. So that was
Where
ConnectWise.
the
I
folks
worked,
are. Oh wow! I don't know if I remembered that.
yeah. So I worked at ConnectWise for 16 years after that. So
Well, ConnectWise has been doing very well for a long time.
ConnectWise, when I started there, they did not have their flagship product, ConnectWise Manage. That's the product that I worked on. And they had about 15 employees. And so at the end, it was 1,500 employees, and then they had been sold to Thoma Bravo for a lot of money. So that worked out well for everyone involved. Everyone there did very well, and kind of that opened up some new opportunities for me. Um, I don't know if you've ever heard of the entrepreneurial kind of adage that you take advantage of the things you have and the things right? So you kind of take stock of where you are and what you have and what you know, and you make what you can of it. And so it kind of allowed me to expand my ambitions a bit, to be able to do things that take longer, right? So an entrepreneur who maybe has a shorter time horizon, they might need to get involved with consulting really quickly, kind of get out there and sell time for money. But
Yeah.
if once you have that
Yeah.
settled, you can maybe do a product, right? So you
Yeah.
kind of do what you can with what you have, and so that allowed me to go off and do a company that was called Speedlight Media. And what we ended up doing with that is building a really amazing hosting platform for doing quality assurance and testing. And we had some really big name clients. This is public. One of them was Pods, the company, the national international kind of shipping.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was
That
gonna
was
make a
just
Tide Pod joke.
yeah, not that one. It was the moving company. So that was really cool working with a big name brand, and that's that's another place where you get a lot of kind of affirmation when you work with people who are important or you work on projects that are really impactful as an entrepreneur. That's just another one of those places that just feels
And
amazing.
network building, which is important.
Yeah, all the people that you meet along the way, you know.
Absolutely.
And then
Yeah.
from there was this thing that was happening in the world. I started using Copilot and it started programming for me. And I thought, oh my God, stop everything, focus on this. That's probably a bad idea for most entrepreneurs. Like the pivot is probably, most people pivot too early or give up too soon.
Yeah.
But there have been like two or three of these now that have said, well, so what you know of me so far, you know that I saw the original internet in my career. I didn't participate in these things. I just observed them because most of us are just observers in this world, and that's fine. So I saw the original internet, and then I saw the way that it took off, and I saw mobile phones, and I saw um, so
Got to be
this
paying attention and observing.
this thing feels like that, at least that important. And a lot of us grew up kind of waiting for AI. So anyway, you take what you have, you take who you know. I went to Arnie Bellini. He
Well, I
was
grew up with, forgive me for
that's
interrupting, and I'm going to remember that you went to Artie Bellini. A lot of us growing up, or at least, well, I don't know if I'm going to, I growing up, I don't know if I count as a lot of us. I growing up thought of AI as as one of those types of unattainable, unrealistic, like going into a black hole. Like, yeah, we'll have AI. You know what I mean? So in any case, that's how I thought of it. And then a few years ago, when it started being 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, when it started being more commonly discussed and then accessible, and then it was actually useful. It was just like, oh my God, really? Wow.
Yeah, there was a guy still around. He works at Google now. Ray Kurzweil. Back
I
in
know.
2000s, he was saying 2020. That's when you'll start seeing AI start to take off. And I remember just kind of reading his stuff and being kind of blown away by it, but that was a long way away, and I kind of started to think, maybe he doesn't know what's going on. I don't really see it, and then all of a sudden I did. So he's spot on with that guy. But yeah, it's one of those things where like that's how exponents work, right? So they get started really slowly, and then all of a sudden you hit that curve, and things
It's
really
game
start.
time.
Yeah, that's where we are. I mean, really on the other side of the curve. And I could
Yeah.
kind of feel it. So I went to Arnie, previous CEO of ConnectWise, and I said, this is a bigger opportunity than what I feel like I can do in a reasonable amount of time on my own. Do you want to, kind of start the newest venture, which is Nine Minds, where working on AI and generative AI for the IT support space to help engineers solve technical problems and do ticketing and things like that. So that's
Very
really
cool.
the journey up until today.
And now it feels like you're playing and having fun.
It should. I mean, ideally, it should. It's like I always feel like entrepreneurs can be so self-serving. Sometimes they're like, "Oh, I'm working 100 hours a week and
Yeah.
uh, everything is terrible." But in reality, it's a very fulfilling thing to do, and there are humongous highs and lows because we put so much of our heart into these things that we're doing, and honestly care about the people we work with, and they trust you, and they come in, and you just don't want to let them down. You feel the weight of the world on you, but yeah, it's a very fulfilling way to live your life.
It's also, I was thinking about this yesterday, or maybe, no, it was yesterday. I was thinking about this yesterday. Sometimes as an entrepreneur, you do something that's a bigger lift or a longer lift. And if you know anything about the way the mind works and the way dopamine works, if you are doing something that takes weeks to accomplish, that can be an extremely draining
Yeah,
experience. And entrepreneurs, oftentimes, to build something properly, whether it be a program or a function of a business or a piece, literal piece of a business, whatever. Uh, there are moments where you're building something and you're like, God, I hope I'm getting this right, and it's stressful.
and then you have like a second or 2 seconds of satisfaction when you're done, and then you're on
Yeah,
to the next thing.
you
There's
just
this
get a
way
little bit of a little air.
you
Go
get
ahead.
like almost nothing out of it. So the way I like to think about it is process over outcomes. Outcomes
Yeah.
are super
Yeah.
important.
Do the behaviors.
Yeah. Just you should get your satisfaction in that, because if you can't, then good luck making it.
Tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we should transition into using open source. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and telling us more about you. Um, we have the topic today about how entrepreneurs can capitalize on this technological boom and the stuff that's out there. How can an entrepreneur capitalize?
Well, I mean, I feel like that our whole world's built on open source. The cloud, Amazon Web Services, the operating systems we use, our phones, all the servers. It's amazing. Our current world really couldn't exist as it is without open source. And even for the products that are out there that are not open source, they've been impacted by open source. So there's maybe a handful of ways that are really obvious, that an entrepreneur can start to take advantage of open source. I think first of all, you just have to kind of take a step back and realize that it's a thing. Realize that there is this thing called open source, and you can kind of go out there and you can find um, these products out there, and you can use them in your company, and there's a lot of benefits to that. Um, like the easiest one is cost savings, right? That's kind
Let,
of go
let me
ahead.
hop in for a quick
Yeah.
second before we go down further into cost savings. I think that point that you just made about recognizing like now is the time to look up, because so many entrepreneurs are head down kind of people and are recognized, like you said, I'm working at 100 hours a week or I'm working 70 hours a week and I'm going to blast through this problem because I know X, Y, and Z will equal A, B, and C. And so they're in that equation and they're putting their work in and they're in their process and they're not looking outside. They're keeping their hands and feet in the vehicle and they're flying forward as aerodynamically as possible. But what you're saying, and the reason I wanted to stop and draw that imagery is what you're saying is stop and look, because you need to reroute. Probably there's probably tools available that could cost savings, which we're about to dive into, but there's probably tools available that can make things faster, and that will position you better if you take the time to stop and understand what's there and what's available. Cost savings.
Well, I mean, in a way, kind of these are, you know, pieces of advice that I need myself, you know, all the time. You really have to just kind of take a step back, and
Right.
there's this thing called the OODA loop where you have to stop and you observe and you decide and you act. So stopping and observing is important, in that loop as entrepreneurs. So yeah, myself included. There's kind of it's kind of a popularity contest where you're like, oh, I've got this product or this problem, and there's this solution that everyone knows, and that's where I'll go. And often, it's not the right one for you, or it's not the best in market, or it's going to lock you into a contract. And maybe that's not what you need as an entrepreneur in that stage of your journey. There are places where it makes sense to go with with one product versus another, but entrepreneurs should definitely know that these things are out there. And I from my perspective, if I thought about it, I would think, oh, I have to run my own servers, or I have to like learn how to install these things. And really, that's not true. A lot of these products, part of the way that they're monetized is that there's a hosting option. So you just go and you sign up for them, like any other company, like any other product. And if you dig into most of these products, you find out that they have millions and millions of users. There's a ticketing platform out there that has 5 million users. And it's not Jira. And then I was doing some research for this podcast, and there every one of the companies I looked at, they're companies that are focused on the product. So, with open source, a lot of what happens is the marketing dollars get kind of pushed into product development, which is fantastic for the people who are using those products, because that's
Word of
really
mouth.
what we're going to be paying for. So
Oh, can I pause? Oh,
yeah,
I want a hard stop. So I had this conversation well, I have a friend of mine works in the Toledo Public School District, and she's preparing for retirement potentially at the end of this year, and she's describing to me how um, family lives have changed over the past 30 years, and how what it's like to actually be in the school has changed over the past 30 years, and she's describing that it's changed for the negative. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, and forgive me, I'm not trying to make a political discussion, and not one way or the other, absolutely, because I don't fall one way or the other. But watching billions of dollars get spent on marketing as opposed to using billions of dollars to make good change for the community, or and in your juxtaposition is open source companies, instead of marketing, are using their money to create amazing products that then market themselves, because it's like, hey, look, something good is happening.
right.
And I
Yeah.
think we got to figure that out. We got to get campaigns, instead of spending the money on marketing, they're spending the money on on creating actual change. But anyway, don't respond to that. Respond to the tech side of it. We can
No,
talk
I mean,
all
what can I say? I agree. Those dollars
about
should be used towards making the product better, to make student outcomes better, you know, uh,
it. Yeah.
all of the different things that matter. Um, and kind of like,
I
you
guess
know,
the connection there with government was if they spent all that money on making school
well,
districts better, and it was like, oh my
it's
God,
enormous.
one
It's
of the
enormous.
parties spent billions of dollars on improving local public schools, and be like, God, they've got my freaking vote. You know what
I
I mean?
remember, how much money like the soda manufacturers spent on marketing to get the schools to put soda machines in the high schools and things. It's just amazing. These
Yeah.
products that are out there, they're often not the best of breed.
Mm.
Um, and
Money
but
over ethics
these are
can't be.
changing just very rapidly.
Yeah.
Um,
Access to information.
yeah, yeah, and also, kind of like, in order for a company that is product focused but has to spend a lot of marketing dollars, and it's the traditional kind of company, there's a lot of secrecy involved, right? So there is the need to kind of make a splash in the market, and to do a lot of different things that are important to do because you have this large marketing budget. But
Mm.
if you kind of shift everything into development, then a lot of that becomes more open, and then the users have more of the ability to steer the product
Mm.
in ways that are important and improve the product over time. So
Wow.
interestingly enough, if you look at the history of most software, when there is an open competitor that enters the marketplace, that product tends to um, become one of the top products, if not the top product. And
Because
the
that's what
one,
people want.
yeah, the one I'll kind of bring up is Linux. Everyone has heard of Linux. It runs on everything. It runs on your phones and watches and servers and everything. And it wasn't clear that was going to be the case. There's Windows Server. There was Sun Microsystems. There were a lot of other options, but kind of all of those forces kind of pushed towards Linux doing really well. And it's not that um, this is like a labor of love for these people. Red Hat was the biggest Linux company in the world, and they are the number one largest software acquisition that's ever occurred in the history of software. $36 billion. They were purchased by IBM. So open source is a way to just have better outcomes, and to do it in a way that is, you know if you're a capitalist, you can love open source. It's fine.
Yeah.
This open source is big business, but it's kind of consumer. It's kind of everyone's aligned, right? So the needs of the user is aligned with the open source producer, and kind of you get better outcomes that way.
Absolutely. So Hugging Face is probably something that you're uh, knowledgeable about and interested in as a topic. And I want you to interrupt me as soon as I'm wrong, because I make mistakes about things. Not about necessarily about Hugging Face, but about what I'm about to say. I recognize I'm
Sure.
stepping on maybe shaky ground in terms of my knowledge. So Hugging Face is a very open source space where AI models are created and shared, and intellectual property is largely shared to create better intellectual property for the community at large. Um, my understanding is also that this is a challenge as it relates to those creators being able to monetize what it is that they're developing. So, first, how accurate was what I just said? And then, second, how does the role of challenge as it relates to monetizing open source technology weigh into the equation?
So what you said was perfectly accurate. Hugging Face is a pretty
Gosh,
amazing platform
yeah,
for sharing
really cool.
uh, model AI models, and basically everything's there. It's the platform for sharing, and also in a lot of ways the open source has had an impact on the large language model generative AI space, um, at least as large as everything else that we've spoken about so far. And so there's a few kind of well trodden ways to monetize open source software. And as open source was coming up, how do you monetize the software was always a big open question. But now it's kind of like there's just a few ways that you can do it. So one of them is you can sell support, right? So you are building this open source software, um, and it becomes important. It's a part of the fabric of the way business is done. Maybe it's part of the infrastructure at a lot of different companies. And then suddenly someone says, "Oh, we're using this storage platform over here. What happens if it breaks?" And then so you call the developers of the product, and you just they can offer support. So that's a really common kind of open source business model.
Ah, okay.
So consulting is a very similar one. Another a company wants to use it. They have this slightly different use case. Maybe they want to fund a change of the software, or they want your help with it, with
So
implementing it.
let me see if I understand this for a second. So, one of the best ways to take differentiated um, technology or IP from open source and to make an effective business model essentially out of it is um, to get lots of that feedback so that it becomes interwoven in organizations. And then because you've created that value and gotten it in a place where it can be valuable, the consulting element of then how to make it better and support in the future is where the lemon meets the squeeze.
Yeah, it's those aligned incentives. Like
Yeah.
they're not going to use it if it's not good, and then once they use it, they depend on it. So you can everyone can feel good about the transaction.
What about folks that are smaller? Like let's say I've got a buddy, and he's an amazing developer. She's an amazing developer, but she's not largely monetized, and she's not got infrastructure around her to build a company. But but she wants to be on Hugging Face, or maybe she shouldn't be on Hugging Face because she's in that scenario. How do you manage situations like that where an individual might create something that's highly available or highly valuable, and then because it's available, they lose the chance to squeeze the lemon?
It's a really interesting question, and it's one that has been top of mind. And one of the ways that well, there are many ways to do it. So going back to what we were talking about before, just create something that people love, right? And it's kind of it reminds me of kind of the social media way of doing things. It's like just get 100 million users and good things happen as far as monetization. Build something that people love, and then they'll ask you, can you host this for me? Because I don't have time to do it myself. I'm not a computer person. I just wish I could just use this thing. And then maybe you can monetize it by hosting it for people. Or they can say, I love your product. We use it everywhere. We wish it had this thing. Maybe make that you use the open core model where you have a core set of features that are available for free, but then there's these enterprise portions that only the bigger companies would need or specialized use cases, and then people pay for those. That's a very common way of doing business. And then there's the support and and maybe even kind of sponsorship where a lot of companies are there's a lot of companies that come together to fund the development. That's how Linux is developed in many ways, is that there's a Linux foundation, and every large tech company in the world um, contributes to the Linux foundation, and they hire people to work full time on it. So, but the small person who doesn't have a big marketing budget, doesn't have a large community behind them, um, that that kind of person should make a very targeted,
Yeah.
great product, put it out there, and then you don't have to worry about spending millions of dollars in marketing because people can come in. They don't need to sign up for a demo. There's all this friction in enterprise sales. No one wants to talk too much to the salesperson. They don't want to put all their information in before they can even see if it's great. They can't find any screenshots of it online. They don't even know if it's very good. All of these things go away. A person could just be like, Saturday night, they want to try it out. They can try it out. They find out that it works, and then they call you, right? So that's really the place you want to be in as an entrepreneur. You put something out, make it great, and then the best way to do it is to work on it in the open until the community asks you for something, right? Because that's when you've really nailed it. Work with the
Mm.
community, build something of value, use their feedback, and then at some point it's going to be important enough to someone where they're going to come to you and ask for something. you
And
know
at that point, you need to start being thoughtful. As soon as people
yeah,
start asking you for
yeah,
things, oh, I've got something that people are interested in. And then you need to start thinking about monetization and IP protection and all these different
very
things.
similar company to the one that you were talking about. So Hugging Face is like an AI focused place, but one of the ones that I was thinking about is a company called GitLab, which was
Yeah.
an open source alternative to GitHub.
Yep.
And GitLab kind of started as an
I
open
think I
source.
got a buddy named Corey that works at
Oh, really?
GitLab. Yeah, it's in
Is it?
Austin.
Well, they're kind of like distributed. They all
Okay,
work
so
from home,
I'll,
so
I'll be
and
damned.
they've got more than 1,000 employees, and they make a $600 million a year. It's a public company now,
Wow.
and that's how they started. They just kind of like open sourced the first version, and they kept working on it. And eventually, people were like, "Hey, can I just use a hosted model? I don't want to run my own server." And then that's the genesis of a $600 million company.
Mm. Yeah,
So
because then
um,
that opens it up to more people being able to utilize the resource.
mhm,
It's like big
absolutely.
screen TVs going down in price and more people being able to access them. Larger
Yeah,
market.
it's like you don't need HD content until you have the big screen TVs. So,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on the time that we've got. I want to ask just one more question, and then I want you to give everybody a little bit of a background on Nine Minds, and then we'll wave at everybody and say happy weekend. If there are entrepreneurs out there watching, what are the open source tools that they need to have in their stable to be able to be successful? And I
Oh,
think there's a
cool.
lot out there for cheap. I think you can be a successful entrepreneur if you've got a good idea right now with not a heavy spend. month to month. So
Yeah,
what are the highlights for folks? What should people like scribble down really quickly before we,
I did a little bit of
other than
research.
9 months?
Right, of course. I did a little bit of research before I got here. So there's a lot of them actually. And I was amazed as I was looking at them. I'm like, okay, we got to stop using this product. We got to go to this open source thing.
Cool.
So for project management, so instead of using Jira, you can use something called Taiga, which is really,
Oh,
really nice looking.
what
Taiga.
in 2019, I was in the top 1% for listeners of Taiga, but different artist.
Is it a different thing? I don't know what it
Completely
means.
awful rap, but it's true. Okay, so
I'll tell
Taiga
you.
as opposed to
So
Jira.
for BI, business intelligence, rather than using Power BI or Tableau, you could use Metabase or Apache Superset. Those are great.
Okay.
Those are both really have huge communities, millions of people using them. So everyone's heard of this content management. You can use WordPress or Drupal to manage your website online, and those are open source.
I didn't know WordPress was.
For Slack, there's something called Mattermost, and it's got all of the Slack features, and it's got tons of integrations, and it can do everything that you want. I read a story about a company that spent more than $1 million on Slack. I thought that was just astounding, amazing.
Oh, that's a lot of money.
For HR, there's a company called Odoo, Odoo HR, and actually that company does a ton.
I've heard of that.
They've got project management and HR, and just all of the different places in your business where you need some enterprise style tool. That company probably has you covered. And again, gigantic community, millions of users. You're not going to be off on your own, hoping that there's like one developer that's going to, wake up and fix the bug. There's more than 1,000 people that work for that company and make these products. So yeah, there's a ton of them out there. I would say like go back to the very beginning where just awareness is key. Be aware that there's alternatives, and you're not giving up much, if anything. There's really no downside of trying it out.
And find a way to tap into the information of the new stuff.
Hmm.
Once a month, lift your head up. So I'll no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go onto that tangent just because of where we're at with time. But find a regular process for looking up and checking like what are the new tools. Find a place you trust that is a good information source, and check it once a month. Check it once a week. But that'll be the businesses that are going to move forward, in my opinion. This is just one goofy SOB's opinion. But in the next 5 to 10 years, the businesses that move forward the most will be the ones that have agility in making change and adjusting what they're doing to new and more efficient ways.
Absolutely.
There's going to be a lot of new and efficient ways to do things.
Gotta move quick. You've
It's gonna
gotta
move.
gotta occasionally reevaluate where you are and where you're going.
Very true. Robert, thank you so much for coming on today. Tell us about 9Minds.
Yeah. So at 9Minds, we're creating products to help IT workers. So we're focusing on tickets right now. IT workers are overwhelmed with the volume of work that's coming in, and these people have to know everything about everything. We kind of focus on companies that do outsourced IT, so they help the community with all of their networking problems and their computer problems. And it's like, like the guy in your family that's great at computers times 1,000. All these people have to know everything. So AI is a perfect fit. We have a product that works with ConnectWise. It's free. You can install our extension. And then when you open your tickets, we start giving you advice. So go try it out.
I love advice. Robert, thank you so much for coming on. Next week, we have Alex Farling from Empath coming on for a conversation about the empathy's role in the entrepreneurial journey. Spoiler alert, I think that if you don't think and consider about others, you're going to have a hard time having success in anything you do, whether it be playing Monopoly with your friends or having success with a business and having large staff under you and a bunch of customers that are happy. So check out that conversation next week. Tri-Unity Strategies just launched a leadership and skills development program as an effort to our mission to creating differentiated pathways to anybody in any socioeconomic position to find success in their careers. And we also do consulting for small businesses, IT service providers, and startups. So check us out next week. Robert, thank you for coming on. I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation, and I hope everybody has a great weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks, Robert.